How long and how loud does the alarm have to go forth, sounding in our ears before you and I realize it's time to wake up? Hi, this is Barry Phillips with 10-Minute Torah, day number 4, Torah portion, Shemot. Shemot meaning names. And again, this is the story of Yah's people. Today, let's go into the book of Exodus, or Shemot, chapter number 3, and read verse number 1. And Moshe was shepherding the flock of Yitro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the back of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of Elohim, Horeb also being known as Mount Sinai. Moshe is a long ways from home. He has ventured into the very backside of the wilderness, a desert area. One would have to ask, what are you doing here? Why are you bringing sheep to where it would not be thought to be much pasture land? What are you running from, Moshe? Where are you going? Well, his journey that he is now on has been going on for some 40 years. Moshe is needed in Mitzrayim. He's needed in Egypt. Now let's give him a little bit of slack here. He had tried 40 years earlier to rise up and be a hero to his people, to help them, to deliver them, to defend them, and they rejected him. He ends up running for his life from Pharaoh as a fugitive. So now he's put off the Mitzrayite garb and identity, and he's taken on the role of a shepherd, working for someone else, keeping their sheep. How the prince of Egypt has fallen. And so we see Moshe now out in the middle of nowhere. It's interesting to me that he may be also running from more than a bounty on his head. Physically, he's detached himself and he's hiding. In his spirit, however, he may be more attached than what he is comfortable with. That is, that while the physical man is physically removed, the spirit man is still in tune with what's going on in Egypt, in Mitzrayim. At the end of chapter number 2, we hear that the people of Yah, they're crying out. It's not so much that they're forming words that we would accept as legitimate prayer, but rather they're just crying out in their pain. Let's think about it. Their men are whipped and beaten, some of them beaten to death. Perhaps wives and mothers never know that when the menfolk go out to work in the morning that they may or may not return home alive. Sons that are born to them are commanded by the government to be thrown into the Nile, to become food for crocodiles, offered and sacrificed to the perceived god of the Nile. Women are weeping because their children have no perceivable, bright, hopeful future. It's hopeless. It's desperate. It's urgent. And they're dying. So they cry. They cry out in their bitter anguish and pain. They're enslaved to a system that oppresses them, and there doesn't seem to be a way out. So perhaps Moshe is hearing in his spirit the great outcry. Yah is listening, and it is Yah who comes to Moshe and says, you're the man. But Moshe doesn't want to hear that. He argues against this plan of being a redeemer, a deliverer. Why? His spirit is agitated. I believe he's running, trying to get away from the sounds that his spirit man is listening to. What about you and I? I live in the great nation of the United States of America. My family's been here for almost 400 years. I have some very warm and loving memories of the better days of this nation. And currently we are in an all-out, not a battle, this is a war. It's not necessarily being fought with handheld guns and weapons of that nature. The men and women across this nation are crying out and bitter hearts toward Yah and asking for deliverance. We've been asking for truth to be revealed, but I've encouraged folks, it's not enough that fraud and deception be revealed. We have to also cry out that it be rectified. Yah looks for righteousness and for right judgment, justice. So if we cry out that righteousness reveal unrighteousness, well and good, but we also have to cry out that Yah would bring forth righteous justice, that we be heard, and it be heard meaningfully. At this point, it doesn't seem that those prayers are yet being answered. What do? How long do the alarms have to go off? How many warning signs do we have to see? How many prophetic words have to come before our eyes before we waken up and realize we cannot handle what is before us according to flesh? We cannot run and hide from what's in front of us. And it's not enough to have a vocal argument. We must cry out until heaven hears us, and he does. But continue to cry out until action is initiated. So Moshe now is in a particular place. He's the shepherd of Midian, strife and contention. He's leading a flock of sheep, a congregation of sorts, to a dry and barren place. Horeb means desert or dry, perhaps even deserted. He's later on going to lead a group of physical people, a congregation of a nation, to a dry, barren place. And there are indeed filled with strife and contention. What do you do when you're a leader and you're dry? What do you do when the well that you're drawing from is filled with dirt and there's nothing wet inside? What do you do when you're hearing the cries of people and you know that it is you yourself, you are the one selected to be a means and a mechanism of deliverance, and you have nothing left to offer? This is Moshe. His spirit's hearing the cries, and Yah comes calling miraculously to him and saying to him, "You are my chosen vessel for their deliverance." And Moshe immediately begins to offer, "Not me. I'm done." I can't count the number of times that some given situation to where I've looked at my wife and said, "I'm done. I don't want to try anymore. I quit. It's just not perceived to be worth it." And I know that as the words are coming out of my mouth that I'm not going to be allowed to quit. I can't. So what do? Well, if this well is dry, if it's dusty and there's nothing to draw from it, you got to set about the task of either digging deeper in that well or digging another one altogether. If you're bone dry and you have nothing else to offer, then you've got to be restored yourself. The question is, how long is it going to take for you and I to be restored in order to help somebody? Because they need us now. So what do? We go through the mechanical motions that we know to go through in order to do something, all the while praying, "Father, somewhere in the middle of all of this, I need you to restore and help me." This Shabbat, my encouragement to you is to break up whatever your normal routines for Shabbat would be and cry out to Him and get on your face, because it's not too late. We still have time. Father, we need a wellspring. We need an artesian well to spring up and to help us. Yeshua said, out of the innermost being would flow rivers of living water. Oh, yeah, we need those. Pray with me. And tomorrow we'll talk further. Until then, shalom.